All right, everybody, we can go ahead and get started. Actually, might be one more person joining us. Hello, welcome. All right. So thank you all again so much for coming out in-person workshop. I think this is actually our first in-person workshop because we all went home, and it's really nice to see people and faces and full-length bodies. So we really appreciate you being here today. Just have a few logistics before we dive in. I wanted to point out that all of today's slides and other materials can be found at BroadE.io, BroadE 2206. I'm actually going to ask that you all navigate to that link. So it's BroadE.io, BroadE 2206, because we're going to grab the overview slide deck that I'm on right now. That just will allow you to have easy access that might come up during the workshop if you run into issues being added to billing, or to take the post-workshop survey as well. So if you all could just grab that PowerPoint, and then you can tuck it away and hide it until we need it. So grab the overview PDF. It's a Terra 101 overview. Let us know at any point if you're having any problems accessing that. Just raise your hand if you can't find it. All right. All right. For those of you just joining us, we're just going to be navigating to this BroadE.io, BroadE 2206. Okay. And I know I've said this, but if you haven't already, you do need to sign up the billing form to be added to a billing project for today's hands-on activities. Anton, who's sitting here, if you want to raise your hand, Anton, he'll add you to a billing project if, during this introduction, so you'll be all set by the time we get to the hands-on portion if you haven't filled it out already. This post-workshop survey, we will be giving you of this workshop to take that survey. So I just wanted to point out that the link is here on this first slide. This is another reason why we're having you grab this Terra overview deck from this short link here right now, just to give you during the hands-on portions at all, or if you have a more broad question, I can answer. And today's presenters / TAs are Anton, me, I'm Liz Kieran, and Tiffany. I pointed out, so just call one of us over if you run into any problems. All right, just a brief overview of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start with a little overview of Terra and take a platform tour. And we'll discuss cloud data a little bit during that. And then you're going to get hands-on and analyze data in a Jupyter Notebook in Terra. We'll take a brief break during. There will be some cookies and coffee, we've heard. So set up, so that should be fun. And then we'll dive into billing and secure collaboration to give you a sense of how. Right. So what you'll learn about today, what Terra is, organizing data, tools, and computational resources, and that's virtual machines, billing, and finding example resources to help you get started. And I wanted to just do this the easy way, the old-fashioned. Everybody, how comfortable are you with data? You can show 3 fingers. If you're very comfortable, you use it all the time. 2. The workshop, you'll go, higher in number and not lower. We'll see. All right. So a bioinformatics platform that can help you access run analysis tools, and collaborate on the cloud. And other organizations are investing billions, like 1,000 Genomes, which has over 3,000 participants, the UK Biobank, which has over 500,000 participants, and the All of Us research program, which has over 1 million participants. How are you going to store it? It's very large. And how are you going to do all of this securely? In analyzing it. Big data means you need big infrastructure. So that can be pretty expensive. You also have issues with, so if you're analyzing your data in one way, software and computational environments to analyze these large data sets. Where Terra comes in as a solution. We're going to learn about what is Terra and why it's on the traditional approach to bioinformatics. So in the traditional, we would bring data to the researchers. So data exists in some sort of central repository, and researchers at their own individual institutions. You're not talking about true data sharing, you're talking about data copying. Requiring a large infrastructure to hold it, and also creating higher costs because the data has to be stored in multiple places. Additionally, as fixed compute settings, the security for this data is only as secure as the weakest security amongst institutions. You have to worry about, researchers have to worry about being pretty much responsible for that security. Let's change that. In the cloud-centric approach, we actually bring researchers to the data. So data is located in a central repository that is accessed by the researchers at their, wherever they are in the world. So you're only paying for one instance of data storage. In this case, you're not getting data copies, you're paying for one central storage. And instead of having environments that are specific to the local infrastructure, you use portable and virtual machines that you can set up with portable packages of software and their dependencies, so that you can actually share your exact compute settings with your colleagues. Is now centralized. So you have comprehensive security fences taking that responsibility away from the researchers. Secure access. Additionally, the model allows you to expand your computations as necessary. So you're no longer paying for that one fixed infrastructure where you have to have it large enough in case you want to do large amounts of data analysis. The cloud allows you to expand your analysis as needed. So you only pay. Any questions about that? All right. As you can imagine, though, clouds might seem daunting out of the box. You might have several questions, like, how am I actually going to find data in the cloud that meets my needs? How do I actually set up a virtual machine and find these portable packages of software that meet my analysis needs? Is a cloud-based platform developed by the BroadE Institute in collaboration with moving to the cloud. capabilities that we're going to explore today that help support research. So first of all, Terra has a data library where you can access public and access controlled data. I'm going to explore these today as well. These are shareable units where you can bring together your data and your tools, share the whole unit essentially with your colleagues. It has workflows. And so if you're familiar with automating analyses, workflows are essentially a script written in the workflow description language that you can use to automate a set of analyses. If you're new to automating your analyses, it's a good opportunity to explore how this can benefit you. Workflows allow you to essentially scale your research, so analyze thousands of samples at once and do it without having to think about the difference. We're not going to go as much today into workflow. And lastly, Terra has interactive analysis. So there are applications on Terra that allow you to perform more bespoke analysis, like RStudio, Jupyter Notebooks, and Galaxy. So today we'll get hands-on with running Jupyter Notebook in Terra. All right, questions about that? All right. So what we want to emphasize is that data and set up virtual environments in Terra, but you are not restricted to Terra. You can find data repositories and methods into Terra and use it. So if you have your own data, you can bring your own data to Terra. You're not restricted to what's already inside there. In a secure environment. So it is not only Terra, but all the components of Terra are in a FISMA and FedRAMP moderate environment. You can find it in the FedRAMP marketplace. And if you are a clinical researcher, there is a 15-minute clinical timeout as well, which meets most security needs. And you're going to follow along for parts of this, and I'll tell you which part. I'm going to go over here and navigate you through this. So first, I'm just going to show you this one additional resource here. And I just wanted to point out that there is a blog at terra.io. So if you ever click that link in these overview slides, it'll take you here. And this blog is a nice way to find out how other researchers are using Terra. And sometimes it can give people tips and tricks for how they might be able to do what they want to do on Terra. So I just encourage it as an additional learning resource. From here, I'm going to Terra. So if I click this login, it'll take me to app.terra.io. Go to app.terra.io. Here, there's a couple of cards here at the bottom. These are direct links to different Terra features. So you'll see this View Workspaces card. That will take you to the list of workspaces you have access to. There's a View Examples card here. This will take you to the Terra data library. And then, sorry, this will take you to the showcase, not the data library. That'll take you to the showcase section where you can explore tutorial workspaces. We're going to look at that in a moment together. And then there's this browse data, which will take you to the data library. All right. Everyone to do is pay attention to this main menu at the top of Terra, the top left, this horizontal 3-line icon. So go ahead and select that icon and log into Terra using the email that you used to register for Terra. Issues logging in? We'll want to fix that right away so that you can do the hands-on version. All right, so let me just walk you through kind of some of these menu options, and then we'll find a workspace together as well. So you can just watch the screen for right now, follow these steps that I'm about to show you. All right, so this main will give you your profile. It'll tell you what groups you belong to. Groups are a way that you can restrict access to different workspaces or other Terra properties. What billing projects you have access to. Cloud environments is where you can see what different virtual machines you've created and are running. Here, as I mentioned, this will take you to the list of all workspaces that you have access to. So you'll see here it has my workspaces, but then there's other columns here, this new and interesting, a featured and a public. New and interesting are just new and interesting workspaces that might be of interest to you. Featured are our showcase tutorial workspaces. I'm going to go more into that in a little bit here. And then there's public workspaces. And so that's any workspace that anyone has decided they just want to make open access to everyone else, but fairly curated in any way. All right, back up to the main menu. There's this library drop down here. And this is where you can access the library, where you can browse public and private repositories, and the showcase workspaces, tutorial workspaces, and workflows. Before I show you this, I just want to also call out the support drop down here, where you can find different resources to help you get started on Terra. So after this workshop, you're going to have access to that billing project for 30 days. So you can go and explore all kinds of different workspaces as you want on your own time. If you run into any issues, we have these quick start guides, tutorials. We also have videos that are posted on YouTube. You can access our community forum and see if anyone else has run into similar questions or challenges. You can also contact the Terra support team directly. And if you want to follow along with what changes are coming to Terra, we have the release notes here. So I just wanted to call those out. Section. So I'm going to start by going to the data repository. So I mentioned that Terra has direct access to several public and private access data repositories. You can go in and browse these and actually export data from these different data browsers to Terra. Some of the data we're going to be working with today is from this 1,000 genomes low coverage project. We might have time to explore that a little bit further, but I just want to show you what this looks like. So you can go in and you can filter based on different criteria. You can find a cohort that meets your research interests and export links to that data into Terra. Each of these different repositories will have a different looking data browser. So it's maintained by the people, the organizations that created the data repository. So just keep that in mind when you're going through these. And there's all sorts of different use cases covered. As I mentioned, the 1,000 genomes low coverage. There's also data from Anvil, from ENCODE, Human Cell Atlas, and Brain Initiative in here. So if there's an open access data set that interests you, I encourage you to go in and browse it later on. Right, going over here to code and workflows. I mentioned that there are scripts that you can use to automate your analysis, and these are written in the workflow description language. You can find some example of these workflows in this code and workflows section. We have highlighted here these GATK4 best practices workflows for whole genome and exome analysis. But you can find additional workflows from DocStore or from the BroadE methods repository, and you can export those WDLs to Terra. So you can search by topic in these two repositories that are external here to Terra. All right, any questions? Okay. So the last page I want to show you is this featured workspaces section. And this is a great way to get up and started with Terra. So all of these featured workspaces are tutorial workspaces. They are curated, meaning they're going to have some uniformity and tutorial elements in them. They'll have downsampled data that allows you to very cheaply test different software or data or different tools. So this is a great way to go in and find one that meets your needs and try it out. You can search for a workspace by topic. So for instance, if you're interested in single cell research, you can type single cell and it'll return the different workspaces that are related to that or have that tag. You can also filter on the left. We have these you can filter by getting started tutorials. You can filter by different analysis tools, experimental strategy, data generation technology, scientific domain, or even by data sets of interest. So these will return any workspaces related to those different facets. Okay. The COVID-19 workspace. So in the search bar, go ahead and type COVID-19. It's COVID-19. And that'll return a couple of different workspaces. We're going to scroll down to the bottom and just bottom here. Is everybody finding that? And does anyone need me to remind you where we went to find the showcase section? Raise your hand. Anybody's lost? Okay. COVID-19 workspace. And then you can, again, watch for a few minutes, and then we're going to do an activity. All right. To a workspace. The first thing you'll see at the top is the name of the workspace, COVID-19 here, and it's going to be preceded by a billing project. You can write down descriptions of what's in that workspace. So if you're sharing it with colleagues, they know what's in it. For our tutorial workspaces, this is also a place where you can find step-by-step instructions on how to run the different tools that are featured in that workspace. In this case, it's several different COVID-19 related workflows. You will also often find links to videos or cost estimates as well in these different tutorial workspaces. So if you want to know how much it costs to run a certain size of data, this might be a good place to come to get an estimate like that. Find out when it was created and who owns the workspace. You can also find cloud information. This cloud information going to create Google Bucket storage that comes with that workspace. It's unique to that workspace. And you can use that cloud storage to upload your own data or any other files that you might need to do your analysis. So we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later on. But if you ever wanted to know what your bucket ID was, it's in here. And it's usually, it starts with FC, the legacy of the platform Fire Cloud. On the Google platform as well. So it just takes you to the Google Cloud platform where your cloud storage is located. Now I want us to navigate to the data page, the data tab here. Coming to the cloud is where is data actually located in the cloud? Where am I actually using it? And does it all have to be in one place? And the answer, I use it from Terra. Like basically, that makes it sound like it could right now, but Azure's coming to Terra. But the main data around in order to use it. You don't have to copy all the data you want to use into a single folder like you might do when you're working from your local machine. You can leave it there and access it there. And that's the point. Then you might have the question, well, how do I organize? Or which files I want to grab? And that's what this data page is essentially your way of organizing your cloud data. So we have a couple of different data tables in this workspace. We have this sample data table. And you can see when you click on it that there are rows that represent different entities, and there are columns that hold different kinds of data or metadata. So this reading here has the sample set and a workspace data table. There's also this reference data section here, which can hold reference files. And we can talk more about that in a moment. But all to do right now is actually get together and pair off into groups, talk with your neighbor. I have a floor together looking at this page. So let me just pull that up. So I want you to get together in groups of 2 or 3 and chat about these 3 at the bottom of the page. What types of data and files do you see in those different data tables? Click through those 3 tables. How are they different? And where are the files actually located? So if you find a file in that data table, where is it actually located? Okay, Everyone's good? All right, then let's go ahead and go through this together. All right, so what types of data table? Sequencing files. You know, like specifically what kind you saw, or file formats or anything? There were some BAM files in there, yeah. Yeah, I heard FastQ, did you say statistics as well? QC. Oh, QC statistics, yeah. Anything else that anyone wants to call out? Okay. Reference data as well. Yeah. That you can store or link to in Terra. Is the kind of file that you need to get to. There's no limit in what kind of things you can store on the cloud. Might be a size limit. Let's see. Now, did anybody notice that there's also metadata? Well, so not necessarily data files, but accession information. Yeah. So you can host both links to data files and also in the tables. All right. How are the tables different? Anyone notice any big differences between some of the tables? Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Is a linked table to the sample table. So it described which samples from that sample table belonged to a set. So that's one way that you can organize data in Terra. You can group samples together and make a set table. You can also make as many over here. You can make as many of those data tables in the first section as you need. All right. So you're not limited to a sample and a sample set table. You can make any data table you want with any name you want. If you need to link two tables together, doing analysis, you can make a set table with another table that you have. So you can link sets and entity tables together. This is what we call an entity. Samples the entity. The other thing that was pointed out was this workspace data table. Notice that it only has a couple of columns. It's shaped differently. This is an area where you can hold different, essentially workspace-wide metadata. So you can imagine if you're processing a bunch of genomic alignment references, this would be a good place to store that information, or any other information that may apply to multiple. All right. And I mentioned that we do have this as well. So what is the difference here between this reference data and this workspace data? This reference data allows you the option to import human references. So if you go to this import data, I can't do it from this page because I don't have access here, but you'll have either a B37 or an HG, is it 39? I think it's HG 39. HG 39 human reference. So if you're not using that, you can use that able to load the references that you need. So it's just a convenient feature that you can use if you happen to be analyzing. Actually located in the cloud. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of those files. So, and you clicked on the file, you could get to the link in the actual storage, which is not on Terra. It's actually on the Google Cloud platform. It's just that you can link to it from Terra, and that's how data files work in Terra. You can link to it. So when you're importing data from different data large organization, you're not actually importing the data. the data. Because remember, you don't need to copy the data from where it lives to use it. You can just stay where it is in the cloud repository.
Quick question, is that true for the workspace data as well? That when you actually have data in the workspace data, are you also just linking the data? Or
yeah, so the workspace comes with storage that's on the Google Cloud platform. So if you store files in the workspace storage, you can definitely point to those files from a data table. But in the workspace, so if you go to this file section here, this is actually a window into. So because every workspace has its own bucket, this is the window into that bucket. And this only works for your workspace bucket. It's not every bucket in the world, it's just your workspace one. But you could also access your files from here as well as file section. So if I were to click on one of these, I could probably find it. I don't know how far down I'm gonna have to go to find a file, but eventually I'll find a file in here. See that it was on the Google Cloud platform. So these are all organized into different workflow folders. All right.
When you take the download data file, there is a charge.
Yeah.
So do we need to pay for any download? Data download?
You do need to pay for data download, and Tiffany is going to speak more about the different costs when you're working in the cloud. But yes, when you download to your local storage, you'll need to, you will incur costs downloading. And remember, the point is to be working in the cloud, and it's actually cheaper to be moving data around in the cloud than it is to be downloading to your local machine. And that charge is usually pretty, like it can be pretty. It's going to be size dependent. It also might depend on where the data is hosted as well. There's different kinds of cloud storage. Some of it is public, some of it's requester pays, where you have to pay the charge to move the data. So that's one little nuance in there too, when you're working with different data. All the tutorial workspaces, I believe is public, at least the ones done by the Terra team, is not requester paid. It's all going to be publicly stored. It still would cost you a penny to download it, but all right. Then I will hand it over to Anton, who will help you get started with some of your hands-on. You need to be exploring this at the same time, and actually you shouldn't, because I want to point out a couple of important things that are coming to Terra. So this is called the notebooks. And this is where you can launch different applications that you can run on a custom virtual computer. So Terra, which is what you're going to do today, you use this cloud environment widget at the top. This allows you to do custom settings, and this is what you're going to do with Anton. The reason we're doing, I'm going to show you this. If you just click this try new layout, you'll see now that the tab is no longer called notebooks, it's called analyses. That's because over time, developed more applications that you can run in Terra. So this is a way that you can launch all those different applications from one place. That's why this change is coming. Because now it's not just Jupyter Notebooks, it's going to be RStudio and Galaxy, and paving the way for other future applications coming in. Now that widget that was up here is over here on the side. And this is where Anton's going to show you how to start a custom cloud environment. But actually very similar. You have your environment configuration icon here. This allows you to create a custom virtual computer for either a Jupyter Notebook, for RStudio, or for Galaxy. When you launch a Jupyter Notebook in Terra, you also have access to this terminal icon. This is the terminal for your virtual computer. So if you're familiar with using Unix command line in a terminal, that's where you would do it in your virtual computer with your Jupyter Notebook. So again, you'll go more into this in just a moment. Okay. For those that don't know what a Jupyter Notebook is, you're going to be doing this today. A Jupyter Notebook is essentially like a digital lab notebook where you can document code, but also write code. So it has little what we call markdown blocks where you can where you can actually run code on the data. All right. I mentioned that we're not going to get really hands-on with workflow. But I want to show you what these look like. So these are where any little workflows that you've imported into your Terra workspace. There's several in this workspace. So I'm going to just click into one so we can go through what this workflow setup page looks like. You can choose what data you want to run in a workflow. The top will have the name of the workflow, and you can see the source of that workflow. So a lot of these little scripts are actually hosted in GitHub, and then they're where you can export it to Terra. So we mentioned that DocStore is one of those external repositories you can find WDLs, but you can also find them in the BroadE methods repository as well. So the source here will tell you where it is. You can click on that and go directly to where the source of the script was. You have the option to run work on inputs where you define where their cloud location is. So if you looked into the dialog box and you click the link for a file in a data table, you may have seen that there was a URL for that file. Cloud storage has a GS:// prefix in front of it. That's the URL for the bucket. So you can go in a workflow configuration and tell the workflow where files are located. But that's not a lot of fun when you have a. So the easier option is to use a data table like the ones that we showed you, because then you can set up your workflow once to pull one of those columns and it'll pull whatever samples you want from that column. So that's the benefit of using data tables with middle workflows in Terra. So you can select which data table you want to use from the select root entity type here, and you can select specific data as well. They also list this page, the workflow setup page also lists the script. So here you can actually look at the WDL script and you can set up inputs based on that script. So Terra does read WDL, and any variables that are listed as an input variable will automatically be pulled into this inputs section here, as well as any outputs that you list will be pulled into the outputs. So it'll allow you to configure a workflow right from the UI. So here's where you could configure again all those inputs and the outputs, and then launch your analysis. So that's just this billing project for 30 days. So if you want to try any of these, we'll give you the tools today that you can try. You can even get started after we're done with the workshop. We'll stick around and help you get going on that if that interests you. All right, the last thing I just want to show you really fast is this job history page. If you do launch a WDL workflow in Terra, you can monitor the status of that workflow from this job history page. If it successfully runs, you'll see a green checkbox. You can also click into a job history run to get cost estimates for workflow cost. Tiffany's going to show you more about this today when she goes over billing. But this is another way that you can identify how much it costs to do something in the cloud. Okay, I think that is. So does anyone have any questions about anything I just showed you? Then Anton is going to come up and he's going to get started.
So we're going to get started on the hands-on portion of today's demonstration. So what we're going to do today, our goal is to use a Jupyter Notebooks application to look at some data in our data tab. Our other goal is to have a short coffee break. So there will be a point at about halfway through my demonstration where we're going to launch our virtual machine, and then it's going to take somewhere around 5 minutes for it to actually spin up. So when we're doing that, we'll break for 10 minutes. So I'm going to start out by showing everyone how to clone their own workspace. Or rather, we'll start by finding the workspace for today's demonstration. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. I'm going to show everyone how to do it through the showcase section, but you could also do it through the workspaces section. Exactly as Liz showed, you can go to the workspaces and start typing the names of public or featured workspaces and they'll show up. but you can also just go to the showcase section, and we're actually going to be using the notebooks tutorial that is tagged here in this filter. You could also just type in quick start notebooks in any variation of those two words, and you'll see it. But if I just click on this filter, it'll show us our Terra Notebooks quick start. I'm going to go into that. I'm going to pause here for like 15 seconds to make sure everyone was able to find this workspace with me. I see nodding heads, so I guess I'll continue. So I'm going to click into the public version of this workspace, and I want to, before I clone it, I want to point out a few of the ways that you can see that this is not a workspace to which I have any kind of access. I can look, I can't launch any compute, I can't do any type of editing. So this is a public version. One of the ways you can tell is that the billing project at the top is a public billing project that most of you will not be members of. You can also tell that you cannot launch any compute power. So if I try to click on the cloud configuration widget, all of these should be grayed out for me. So actually these aren't in my case because this user that we're logged in right now does have access to that billing project. But if it didn't, and you'll see this on your own screen if you're following along, these will not be accessible to you. And you can also see that's true if you revert to the original layout. So for me, this widget is accessible, but for all of you, this button should be grayed out because you would not have access to the public workspace. Just before I clone my own copy, I want to point out one last thing so everyone can see the difference. First of all, you can see the owners listed for this public workspace. Here are all of the owners, and all of these will be replaced with your email address once you create your own copy. And the same thing is true for this, these bucket details. So every time you create your own clone of a workspace, you will also create a dedicated Google bucket to go along with it. So this address will be unique to the clone that you create. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to try to do this part kind of slowly so everyone can follow along. But what you do is click on the 3-dot button, which should be visible from any one of these tabs, so long as you're in a workspace. And you're going to click clone. You are going to select the billing project for today's workshop, BroadE. You're going to select the billing project for today. And you're going to leave everything else the same. I'll just quickly point out here at the bottom, we get a lot of questions about the authorization domain. Oh, do I need to have an authorization domain? You do not need an authorization domain for most things. This is optional and we won't use one today. This is an added security feature for giving you access to protected data. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot. So important. You have to make the name unique. So there can be only one name per, one unique name per billing project. So I'm going to go ahead and just add my name and today, date, for example, June 20, what is it today? 27. And click clone workspace. This will take a couple seconds, not too long. There we go. And so right away, you can see a couple of indicators that I'm now working in my own fresh clone. First of all, you can see that the billing project listed here is now the one that I just used to create it. The name of the workspace is now the unique name that I gave it. You can see under owners that or rather Liz, is now the sole owner of this workspace because it was just created. And the same thing about the cloud information. So now we have our own unique bucket for just this workspace. We did, however, carry with us all of the data tables from the public-facing version of the workspace. So you can click through these to take a look, but we have 3 different tables here. We have a large sample table with 2,500 samples. We have a consolidated cohort sample and also a big query table. And all of these are here to interact with the sample notebooks that we have in this workspace. So you should feel free to continue on with this quick start after today, because we're only going to do the first of 4 notebooks. Pause for a second just to make sure everyone has been able to follow along. Give everyone 30 seconds to make sure they're all cloned. Please raise your hand if you're having any trouble.
I don't have the notebook tab.
Do you have a tab that is called the analyses tab?
Yes.
So that's the same thing. And this is the change in layout that Liz was just describing. So the notebooks tab is getting replaced soon with the analysis tab. In case anybody's curious, because we have a lot of documentation that people will be able to read that may describe the older way of doing things. So this is how the layout has looked in the past. And what you would usually do is click on one of the notebooks and click open. Or if you wanted to create your cloud environment from scratch, you would use this button, this top right widget. But for today's demonstration, we're going to go ahead and go to the new layout. I'm going to new layout. Not over right now. You can see now the layout looks a little bit different. You can always revert to the old layout. Now, instead of having the application configuration up here, it's over here. So let's go ahead and click on the environment configuration. And we'll talk a little bit about what options are available to you. So we rearranged the layout so that you can select the type of application as a first step. These are the 3 applications for cloud environments that Terra currently supports, although we'll likely be adding more very soon. And today we're going to work on a Jupyter notebook. So I'm going to click on Environment Settings. This will take me to an option to either create a default environment with the default settings, or I can customize it. So that's what I'm going to click on right now, not because we need to customize our environment for this demonstration. We're actually going to use the default, but I want to show everyone how customization works. So to reiterate, the purpose of the cloud environment is to give users a way to reproducibly share the exact right environmental configurations with one another. It's kind of a one-stop shop place to select all of your environmental settings in a consistent and simple, WYSIWYG kind of way. So the cloud environment comes with 3 types of components. It comes with software, it comes with compute, and it comes with its own dedicated storage. This is an important point. So we've talked a lot about how every time you clone a workspace, you create a dedicated Google bucket for that workspace. When you spin up a cloud environment, you create yet another Google bucket that is separate from your workspace Google bucket. That is called the persistent disk, the persistent storage for the virtual cloud environment. So I'll show you here in this menu how to configure all of these things. So let's start with the software. Cloud environments come with a set of predetermined Docker images. If you're not familiar with Docker, it's a software technology for sharing large packages of data or sets of packages that have a lot of interdependencies. So it's a very sophisticated system for being able to share computational environments that are consistent and updated in a central way, so that people aren't always trying to figure out, oh, you know, how updated is my set of packages for this type of analysis or that type of analysis. And the nice thing about Terra is that we have Docker images installed on the back end. So you don't really have to worry about how they're implemented or how to create your own custom Docker images, but you can if you want. In general, people will just select the Docker image that is most appropriate for their analysis. So we have specialized Docker images for bioconductor, for example, for hail. We also have legacy images. So for example, if you've shared, if you're working on an analysis that was shared with you some time ago and there's something going wrong with that analysis, one of the first things you can try is to spin it up in an older, with an older Docker image and see if maybe the problem is that some of the dependencies have been updated. In addition to those, there are some community maintained Jupyter environments for certain custom applications. So for example, there's a Pegasus Docker image. And there's also an option for creating your own custom environment. So just out of curiosity, how many people in this room show of hands? I see 2.5. So, oh, I see 3.5. Follow-up question: of those 3 or 4 people, how many have created their own custom Dockers? Okay, yes. So that's a somewhat niche use, but it is exposed on Terra. So you can do that. And if you want to have your community maintained Docker image published, that is also possible. You just have to talk to us. Yes.
So if you need to use do a custom version,
you can just install them in your notebook in the regular way. I should also point out how you can look at what's in a particular environment. So what's installed on this environment will pull up this view that shows me exactly what packages and what versions of those packages are there. But yeah, if there's a specific package that you know is either not on there, or you can look through here and you see that the package is there, but it's one version behind, then yeah, you'll have to do your own install. So that kind of takes us through the software aspect. For the compute configuration, we have a lot of options exposed here. You can choose the number of CPUs, the amount of RAM. You can also enable GPUs if you're interested in doing machine learning, for example. You can click out to our documentation on that topic if you're interested. We enable you to select the type of GPU and the number of GPUs. You can also select standard virtual machines or Spark single nodes or Spark clusters. If you're using Hail, for example. We've also exposed the auto pause setting here so that you can choose how long your notebook can stay idle before it automatically pauses itself. So some people like to have this be a little bit shorter because they want to make sure they're very carefully conserving money. Some people want to make this a little bit longer because they know that they're going to be running cells that might take a very long time to actually complete, and they don't want auto pause to ruin that. And then there is also the persistent disk, which you can also choose either a standard or a solid state option, and you can choose the size of your persistent disk. And the thing to understand about the persistent disk is that it is a detachable persistent disk. So while you're working on your virtual machine, the things that you're doing are getting stored to the bucket, to this persistent disk bucket, rather than to your workspace bucket. In the past, we always just advised people to, and I say in the past, about 2 years ago, before we made the storage persistent, we always advise people when they're done with their analyses to make sure to copy things from their cloud environment to something that won't get deleted when they delete their cloud environment. We improved the system by making the storage persistent. So when you delete your cloud environment, which we'll do at the end of today's session, you have the option to not delete the storage and to reattach it to a new cloud environment later on. So that saves on storage costs and simplifies the workflow of not losing your data as you're doing your analysis. So with that, I'm going to say that we should create our default environment, and then we'll take a break for 10 minutes, and I'll describe what's in these notebooks, and we'll open one up and run it. So everyone go ahead and click create. You can see, first of all, I now have my Jupyter environment icon here. When I mouse over it, it says creating. So it'll take about 3 to 5 minutes. And if I were to try to open one of these notebooks in an editable view, it'll give me this message, creating cloud environment. So hopefully everyone's ready to continue with our little hands-on demonstration. Can I just get by show of hands, does everyone have a running cloud environment now? Most people. So you can tell, by the way, by just mousing over this icon over here, and now it says Jupyter Notebooks running. We can finally get started with our actual hands-on exercise. So to start, I just want to reiterate that the purpose of this workspace, this is one of our customer delivery team featured educational materials. And the purpose of it is to give you a hands-on walkthrough of launching notebooks, using notebooks, and particularly how to have your notebooks interact with different types of data tables. So for that purpose, this workspace comes with a couple of different types of data tables, as I pointed out before. So for example, we have a sample data table, which is actually a whole data table with all of the metadata for this group of 2,500 participants. There's also this cohort table, which is actually a SQL query organizing a cohort from the 1000 Genomes project. So if we have time, we'll show you how to build a cohort like that. And also there is a big query table. So this is another type of a query that organizes a set of samples. And these are 3 different types of tables that are here because the notebooks in this workspace are all designed to give you a flavor for how to point a notebook at a particular type of data and what sorts of things you can do with it. So in today's hands-on demonstration, we're only going to have time to run this option 1 notebook. But just to give you a brief idea, there are 5 notebooks here. The most basic one is this Jupyter Notebooks 101 notebook. And that one's basically, if you're a newbie for the Jupyter application, then this one will give you lots of tips and tricks and show you how to use Jupyter in general, and give you a little bit of information about our implementation of the Jupyter application. And then there are these 4 notebooks, 1, 2, 3, 4, that take you through different exercises with those data tables. So for example, you can see this option 4 one is the notebook that interacts with the big query table. So we very much encourage everyone to go through the entire quick start process on their own. For today, we're going to do notebook 1. I just clicked on notebook 1. You'll notice that I'm still in my preview read-only version. So I can't click on any of these cells or run them. But if I try to open this in either mode, Then I will engage my cloud environment. And I will now see my Jupyter Notebook fully rendered. In case anyone's curious, the playground mode works exactly the same. It's just there so that two people can be working on the same notebook at the same time. So it's a way of not overwriting each other. So 99% of the time, you can just open an editable view by clicking open. But if you were to share this exact workspace with another person and you clicked open on a notebook and you wanted them to be working on the same notebook at the same time, they wouldn't have access to the same editable version because we don't want you to overwrite one another. But they can open it in playground mode. And the only difference is that what happens in playground mode stays in playground mode unless you actively save it or export it somewhere. It won't get auto-saved. So here I am in edit mode. And as Liz pointed out, we have two different types of cells. There are markdown cells and there are code cells. If I scroll down to here, we have code cells. So that's the difference between how the two look. You can actually also change whether or not they are markdown or code cells right here. So be careful. If you accidentally change a code cell to a markdown cell, now all of a sudden it won't work. I want to make sure that it works. I can change it to a code cell and it'll be functional. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I want everyone else to do it as well, is I'm going to clear all of the outputs for this notebook because we want the educational process to feel very realistic. And we don't want all of the outputs to already be here. So I'll just point out what I mean. But here's an example of an output. The output of this cell is this stuff. The output of this cell is this stuff. But we want you all to generate it yourselves. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the cell menu. And we're going to click on all outputs. If we were to click on current output, we would be doing that to whichever cell we have selected. So like I have this cell selected and I could clear just the output from that cell, or I could clear all of the outputs from all the cells. Boom. And now our Jupyter Notebook is clean and ready for a fresh one. I'm going to pause for like 10 seconds to make sure everyone is following along. Everyone successfully cleared all of their outputs. Let's start by running the cells in this notebook. So I'm going to scroll down to the first code cell, that's not commented out. You can tell I can run this cell, but it actually won't do anything because all of the things in it are commented out. You need to run are all of these packages. The way that I did that was by hitting the hotkey for running a cell, which is Shift Return. You can also use this play button to run a particular cell. So just rerun that, same exact thing. Also run cells through the cell menu, because you can run the entire notebook all at once. You can run all of the cells above or below the one that you have selected. So once we run that, we can run our cell to set our environmental variables. So first we imported some packages that we needed for this analysis that weren't already a part of the default environment. Now we're going to set our environmental variables. This is just a way that we have implemented for the notebooks to know how to look at their own workspaces. So this cell is the cell that tells this virtual cloud environment to point at the workspace that it exists in. Because remember, the cloud environment and the workspace are separate things. And I'm going to pause for a second just to ask if everybody successfully got an output. Do you have a problem or not? What? one of our TAs will come over and help you right away. Is everyone in general? Yeah, if you're having any problems at this point, just raise your hand and a TA will help you in a jiffy. Hopefully everyone is able to follow along. I'm going to continue running some of these cells. So this cell, for example, loads phenotype data. So we'll get all of the phenotype data from the sample table and load it into a pandas data frame, and we'll print out the top 6 lines. Definitely raise your hand if you're having trouble at any point. So once you've done that, once you've given your notebook, once you've pointed your notebook at the right data table, I'm going to show you how you can create some visualizations of that data. So I'm going to start by just running this big cell defining different plotting functions. Once I do that,
They expect an output from that.
they should not expect an output. Well, this cell ran successfully if there is no error message at the bottom here. And you can also tell whether or not a cell has completed the run by the fact that there is a number in this location. So if I were to run this cell again, you'll see that very briefly, the number will be replaced by an asterisk. Is because it scrolls down to the bottom. But when I ran this, first this number was replaced by an asterisk while the kernel was thinking about it and running it. And then it was replaced by a number representing how many times a cell has been executed since the last time a kernel was restarted.
Excuse me, the
Yes.
section number is different from ours.
Sorry?
The section number is different.
The section numbers,
Yeah,
these numbers?
6.1 our mine.
Oh, you know, this is because I had changed one of these cells briefly. So if everybody looks at how Markdown works, quite interesting. It's active, right? So right now, this is supposed to be section 2, and these nested ones are sections 2.1, 2.2. If I run this, it changes automatically, right? So it knows how to interpret the different level headers. So that was the only reason why it changed in mine, because I had messed with something and created an additional header somewhere, and it renumbered all the headers below.
So just to confirm. Everybody sees 4 sections.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. I didn't even notice that I had done that. So yes, there are 4 sections, and we're actually getting to the section where we're going to let everyone here loose and try some of their own things. So just going to run this one cell. I'm going to point out this is where you can choose a different variable to visualize. And the list of variables that are available to you is right here. I'm going to pause for 5 minutes and 5 to 10 minutes and give everyone a chance to play around with some of these visualizations. So we have a sample code here for 3 types of visualizations. We have univariate distribution, we have bivariate distributions, and we have box plots. So all of these have certain parameters that you can change. Create these types of visualizations. There's a summary of what those visualizations are here. It also gives you some information on what types of parameters you can use for the data. So for example, there's a type argument in the bivariate distribution, and here are your options for that. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Wonderful. And let's play around with these for about 5 minutes. And then to scroll back up and show you how to point at a different table than the one that we're pointing at currently. That will wrap up the hands-on portion of this demo. I would like everyone to scroll back up to section 3.2 so that we can take a look at how we can point at different tables in our data tab. So first of all, I'm going to go back to the data tab very quickly to point out how these things match. So right now, we are using the this package to select the sample set. The entity is sample ID, and it's a sample type of table. So when I go to data and I click on sample, you can see that these top 5 rows match the ones that we were just looking at. Ooh. Go back here. Section 3.2. And by the way, this table of contents is clear, so that's nice. These match the ones in this data tab. Now, if I want to look at the cohort instead, this one right here, I'm going to change all of the instances of the word sample, where it's in quotes, to the word cohort. And looking at this line instead. So you can see they match. If I had done something wrong, like that, and error. Oh, I hope this error doesn't take too long. Why that doesn't error out. I just want to point out that I did not change the instances of the word sample here or here, because that's just the variable name that you've assigned in this particular cell. If you were to change this instance of the word sample, then you just have to make sure to also change it down here. Right, so that's how it knows to use this particular variable. So you've stored that cohort in this variable, and then you'll be able to run those cells for that. So it's the last couple of things that I'll point out in this demonstration. As Liz mentioned, you are able to open a terminal to your virtual machine. So this icon right here allows you to open a traditional command line interface like that. So I'm right now just looking at the home directory of my cloud environment, right? Not my workspace bucket. And I can do all the same things that I would normally be able to do in the terminal. I can gsutil, I can move around between directories. Oops. Away. And the last couple of things that I wanted to show you is the fact that you can import additional data right in this tab. So for example, You could click import data and upload a TSV. So if you're familiar with TSV spreadsheets, all of these are just written in TSV format spreadsheets. And so you can write a TSV spreadsheet yourself from scratch. You can download a TSV of another table if you want to modify it somehow and re-upload it somewhere else. You can also just export one of these tables directly to another workspace. And I just want to reiterate that this is an example of one of the key aspects of Terra. If I were to copy this table to another workspace, all I'm copying is the data pointing to all the big genomic files. The genomic files stay exactly where they are, which means that the onus for security stays on the data curators, who have to give you whatever access you need. And really, it does all that magical stuff that Terra does. It keeps all of the data in one central place and gives you a way to access it using credentials if necessary, but without actually copying it. And of course, you can go to the Data Explorer. Liz was showing. Select, let's say we were just select a small amount of data. Or for this particular repository, as you can see, this is a way of filtering out filtering down the 3,500 total participants. So based on another parameter, and slowly I've whittled it down from 3,500 to 350, and then I can save that cohort, and I can send that cohort to another workspace. So actually, that's exactly how the cohort in the Quick Start workspace was created. It is from this 1,000 genomes data explorer. So with that, we're just going to end by deleting our cloud environment. We don't always want our cloud environments to just stay taking up space, because even when it's paused, for example, I can pause this cloud environment, and right now its cost is about 7 cents per hour. If I were to pause it, the idle price would be like a penny per hour, I think. But if I want to just delete it, then I can do it a couple of different ways. There it is. Sorry. Where did it go? So there's the delete environment option that you can access through the workspace. When I click delete, it gives me these couple of options, basically for either keeping or deleting the persistent disk storage, as I mentioned. So if I keep this persistent disk, then it gives you some information about what that means. You will continue incurring the $2 per month storage cost, but you won't be incurring any additional cost for just having your idle machine in existence. Or you can just delete everything. And then I'll end by pointing out that you can also look at all of your existing cloud environments under your name in the cloud environment section. This is a place where it will list in one central location all of the different cloud environments you're using, all of the persistent disks that exist. And it gives you a one-stop shop place for pausing them or deleting them. So with that, unless I'm forgetting something, this to the end of our hands-on demo. So I'll gladly take any questions, then we'll break for 5 minutes, and then Tiffany will tell us about billing on Terra.
We'll go ahead and get started on the billing and secure collaboration section and hopefully wrap up the next. So, hello, my name is Tiffany Miller and I lead the customer success team within the data science platform. So I'll be talking about how to get started with billing, which is a very exciting topic. So hopefully I can keep your attention while we're going through that. So to do that, I have some questions I'm going to ask you at the end. So a little quiz to see who's been paying attention. So the questions are, what cloud computing vendors work with Terra? What costs money in Terra and how do you pay for it? What is a Terra billing project and how is it connected with the workspace? So you learned about workspaces today. You heard us throw around the word billing project. How is that related? Where can you see how much you've spent? We've also looked a lot at that today, so we'll go through that again. And are there any recommendations for getting started with running analyses and securely sharing your workspaces? There's some tricks, I would say, tips and tricks that if you get started using some of these features today, it makes it very easy for you to like manage more people in your group as they start to join you in doing analyses on Terra. We're going to start off by talking a little bit more high level about cloud vendors. So there are kind of three big cloud vendors. There are other cloud vendors, but the ones you probably hear about a lot are the Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services or AWS, and Microsoft Azure, or yeah, there's another way people say that, Azure and another. Anyway, so those are kind of big cloud vendors. And what they offer is they have these very large data centers that they've built, and they're basically charging you to access their technical infrastructure. And they promise to keep that technical infrastructure very secure for you. And that is what they're selling. And they're selling it to you as a pay-as-you-go model. So that's why you're hearing Anton and Liz talking about spinning up these virtual machines in the cloud, in these clouds, and they're a pay-as-you-go model. So Terra itself is actually free to use. You obviously signed up for an account before we got started with the Terra billing project, and you can browse data sets, you can look at the featured workspaces, you can see what tutorials are available. But until you want to actually start doing analyses, that's when you actually have to start paying for that compute and storage that you're using in the cloud. So you're not going to set up a billing relationship with the BroadE per se. You're going to be setting it up with one of these vendors. So that is pretty much a key thing to know about Terra, is that you're not really paying the BroadE to use it. We're not a for-profit entity here. We're offering this, but you have to pay for what you're using to the people that are providing the service. So essentially what you'll do is you're going to work with the Google Cloud Platform, and in the future, Microsoft Azure or Azure. So one of the key things to know is that you'll set up that billing relationship with them. Terra right now is primarily built on GCP, Google Cloud Platform, but we're working towards making it available and to be multi-cloud, so you can also work on it with Microsoft Azure. So let's see, I think we covered all these points. But what are the actual costs of working on Terra? So there's kind of three main categories you can think of. There's compute costs. So depending on the type of parameters of the machine that you're using, is it a big machine or a small machine? Is it like a cheaper machine? There are different options there. You'll be paying for that. For data storage, we talked about Google buckets and the workspace bucket. You would pay for any sort of data that you're generating, that you're storing in your workspaces bucket. That would be a part of the storage costs. We also talk about persistent disks. So when you were creating an interactive analysis environment, you had a persistent disk attached to it. And as long as you're keeping that persistent disk, you're paying for some storage. Data egress. So Liz talked about this. You have the ability to download files off of the cloud and there's a fee to do that. If you're moving the data around the cloud, if I'm moving it from the US to Australia, there might be a fee that they charge for that. They really get you everywhere. They can. So a lot of ways that you can incur costs, but once you get started, we try to help you, figure out a way to do that without, so that you can estimate how much you're going to spend. And we'll talk about how you can estimate your spend in this session here. Okay, so costs are organized by your workspace. So for my workspaces, I have, to assign a Terra billing project at the very beginning of it. And when I do that, I'm basically saying all of the workspace costs that I accrue here when I'm doing work here, I want to charge back to this Terra billing project. So this is essentially what this is a feature that is linking a cloud billing account with a workspace. And it's like a pass-through. So essentially, once you have that cloud billing account set up and you have your Terra billing project, anything that's going on in the workspace is getting charged back. And something that is kind of interesting to think about here is when you are, working in your workspace, and say I shared my workspace with somebody as a writer or an owner, I give them access to it. If they're doing their analyses in my workspace, they're not getting charged for it. I'm getting charged for it because I've given them access to my workspace, and my billing project is attached to that, not theirs. And that's an important thing to think about as you're thinking of who you're sharing your workspace with, and who's actually able to accrue costs. I like the analogy of like thinking about it as I'm in my house and I pay for my electricity. But, if I invite Anton over and he turns the light on, like he's not paying for the electricity. I still am paying for the electricity. So that's one way you can kind of think about it. Okay, so let's talk in more detail about compute costs and estimating. So you can find cost estimates, Anton mentioned this, in featured workspaces. So we like to put together tables that show you, here is a small sample that we ran this workflow on. This is about how much it costs using this type of configuration, this type of, by configuration, I mean the type, machine sizes and things like that. So that's something that we provide for you because, again, when people are getting started, you're hopefully, looking at what other people have done, maybe trying out a workflow or two, and then, taking that, maybe adapting it to your own use case. So that gives you kind of a good sense before you start launching lots of jobs, what it costs. In the job history page, once you're past that point of like, I've played around enough, like I want to run this on my own data, we always recommend running on a small sample or just, one sample, try out the workflow, get the workflow to work. When you're trying to edit workflows, you'll often have failures that happen. It's just part of the process. Eventually, you'll get the workflow to work, and then you'll see how much the run cost is in the job history section here. Luckily, for people that have the BroadEinstitute.org accounts and set up their billing through the Broad, there's no steps to set this up. Usually there's a link here on how to set it up here, but you do not have to worry about those steps. It should just work automatically for you. So that's for workflows. Now, what about cloud environments? So for cloud environments, I don't know if you noticed this, but at the top of your widget, there was different estimations here. And if you change, the parameters of the machine, like the CPUs, the memory, the persistent disks, that'll be reflected in the costs above. So if you think that you're going to be, you're planning out your time and you're like, okay, I'm probably going to have to use this machine to interrogate the data for like 30 hours, you can try to figure out what that math is and estimate how much you're going to spend on that. Storage costs. All right, so in the workspace, costs are organized by workspace. You have your workspace bucket. You'll see in the workspace information section an estimated monthly cost. So again, that'll give you a sense of how much it costs. This dashboard looks a little bit different. There's a lot more information in your dashboard section now, which is great. So it tells you, it looks a little different, but it should still have that estimated monthly cost for you, and tell you, yeah, more information about your workspace bucket. Oh yeah, I think the other thing that I wanted to point out is it actually tells you how much data is in your bucket now in the right-hand side, which is really great. Okay, egress. So someone brought this up today, but if you're looking in your data tables and you see a file that you want to download, you can click on it and see how much it costs to take it off of the cloud. So, you know, if you're planning on just using Terra to do one project, and once you're done, you know you're not going to leave that data in Terra forever. You're going to move it to somewhere for long-term storage, and you can kind of get a sense of how much it's going to cost to take it off the cloud. Okay. So for the BroadE, you have, I'll go through the steps of setting up the Google billing account, but a lot of users like to go directly into the Google Cloud Console to see exactly how much things cost. So I'm sharing this with you all, but there's particular permissions that you need on the Google billing account to be able to see this. So depending, I guess, on what your position is in your group, you may or may not have access to this, but somebody will have access to this within your group. So this is what it looks like. You're able to see different reports. For example, here it shows me, let's see, what is this? This is for last month, how much persistent disk capacity that I have and how much did that cost. So again, you can kind of see your breakdown of like, where am I spending a lot of money, and like, where do I need to figure out how to reduce, this amount here. So that is something that is great to know about. And then another thing that's pretty cool is in the last year, we have changed the backend of Terra so that every time you create a workspace, it comes with its own unique Google project. And what that means is I can actually set up budget alerts for individual workspaces. So if my workspace that I'm sharing with many people and we're all working in, if I don't want it to go past $300 and I want, to be notified that that is going to be past $300, I can set up this budget alert in GCP, and I can say, once it hits this amount, let me know, or once I'm 50% close to hitting this amount, or if you are looking at what I'm doing in the cloud and you're forecasting that that's going to hit $300 and very soon, please let me know. This is a way to kind of notify yourself. And you can, notify yourself or others when that workspace is getting to the cost that, you want it to stay below, I guess. Any questions about that? Okay, so we're kind of segueing now into roles and permissions, so you can kind of get a sense of, how do I control who spends what, where, and how does that all work? So for the Terra billing project, there are two main roles when you create a Terra billing project: owners or users. And what that means is if I am an owner of my Terra billing project, you can kind of think of this as like a PI should probably be an owner of the money that they got for a grant or something like that, right? And they want to see all of the workspaces that their team is creating under their billing project. So they might have an owner access to the Terra billing project, and they might give other people the ability to use it to create new workspaces. But if I am the owner of it, I can see everything. So when I go to my workspaces view, I can go see all of the workspaces that were created under my Terra billing project, because ultimately I'm paying for it. So I should be able to see that. So when you go into the dashboard and you see the filters, there's this filter called project owner, and that's what that means. That's how you're able to see that information. So when you're getting started, it's, you know, good to keep people that are owners that should see and be able to delete, by the way, those workspaces. Make sure that, you know, they're the people that have that privilege. You know who those people are. And then the people that can use it to go spin up new workspaces, you can just set them up as a user. Okay, and then for workspaces. So workspaces are connected to the Terra billing projects. They have different roles on them as well. So the 3 roles are owners, writers, and readers. And then when you see the ability to share, there's the ability to take away the can share or can compute options. So you can kind of control that at a little bit more granular level. And so all of these roles have the ability to accrue some sort of cost. So that's really the takeaway for this slide is even a reader, because they have the ability to read the data, they can download the data to their local machine and they can accrue a small fee for that if they're reading the data. So writers and owners are the ones that can do all the computing power in your workspace. So be careful with who you're sharing with, I guess. So just be aware of that as you're working in the system. And the last line here, costs are charged to the workspace billing project, not the user. That's related to the electricity analogy. Anton's not paying for my electricity when he turns the light on.
I'm going to turn all the lights on.
Okay, so groups, I think this is a great thing to know when you're really new because it's a way to really set up access for people. Groups are things that you could, they're like Google groups. You have a group, there are people that have the ability to administrate the group and add people or take away people, and you have people that are in the group. You can use groups and share workspaces with groups. So if you have a lab group and you want everybody in your lab to have access to the workspace, you give access to the group, and then you don't have to, when people leave the lab, you don't have to individually remove them from all of your workspaces. You just remove them from the group. So that's just something that's nice to know about when you're getting started. If you have, especially like, 100 workspaces or something crazy, you're not going to want to individually remove somebody from all of that. So definitely take advantage of groups for that. So another thing that you can use groups for are not only workspaces, but Terra billing projects. So you can give everybody in your lab access to use that Terra billing project as a user. So again, a lot easier than manually giving people access to things. Authorization domains, and this is where groups are used again. So whenever you are setting up your workspace, you can control what groups that you have access to restrict access even further to just those people in the group. So the reason this feature was created was back when we got the ability to share TCGA data. We wanted to make sure that people, it was secure and that data wasn't getting passed over to people that weren't supposed to have it. And, if you're able to clone a workspace, say you clone my workspace and somebody clones your workspace, I no longer have any clue like how many people removed have cloned this workspace. So to make sure that that the people that can actually see that workspace are people I know about or TCGA, managed user allow list know about, you add a group to it. So when you add a group, I'm in this group and this group. The more groups you add, the person has to be in all of them in order to actually see the workspace. And just because I create an authorization domain with groups, and it doesn't mean I'm automatically giving somebody that workspace, I have to also share it with them. So what that means is, if I have my workspace, Anton clones it, Anton shares it with somebody else that's not in the group. They now see that somebody shared it with them, but when they try to access it, they can't access it until I add them to my group. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions about it, let me know. But that's a security feature that I would say take advantage of that a little bit later on, maybe not at the beginning when you're playing around because it's very restrictive, obviously. So, yeah, that's the purpose of it. Okay, setting up billing. So there's sort of three main ways that you can really just start working in Terra. So one is allowing a collaborator to grant can compute permission in a workspace. So by giving you owner or writer access to the workspace, you don't have to do any billing setup. You can go ahead and start working in Terra right away. That's fine. That's one way of getting going. And your costs are being covered by their Terra billing project for that workspace. Second way is an owner of an existing Terra billing project as you to use their billing project. That's what we did today for the workshop. We gave you all the ability to use our Terra billing project so that you could make a copy of the workspace. And then finally, you can use your own cloud billing account and Terra billing project. And so to do that, very simple, you can request a sub account from Bits by filling out this form at this link. And a sub account is just another Google term for a billing account. But essentially what they'll need is they need to know that your budget for Terra, and we also advise you to speak with your grant administrator or your PI to determine like how much funding you have and what you should be setting up as budgets and stuff like that. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, that's it for my session. So we'll go back and revisit the questions. So what cloud vendors work with Terra? Anybody? Not AWS, GCP, and one more.
Sure.
Yes, Azure. Soon, very soon. What costs money in Terra and how do you pay for it? Oh, I forgot. Storage, yep. Compute. Egress, awesome. How do you pay for it? Yep. So you pay with it with your Terra billing project linked with a cloud billing account. So Google Cloud billing account right now. One day you can also do that with Azure. And either way, that has to link up with a Terra billing project so that you can pay as you're generating workspace. Okay, what is a Terra billing project and how is it connected with the workspace? Or to set it, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. It's a feature in Terra that connects a cloud billing account and a workspace so that costs accrued in the workspace get paid for. Where can you see how much you've spent in Terra? A few places. Yes. Yep. And within Terra, you can see it in the job history tab and the workspace dashboard as well. Any recommendations for getting started with running workflows, cloud environments, and securely sharing workspaces? How about recommendations for running workflows? Yes. And then how about securely sharing workspaces? Using groups? Oh, yeah, are you going to say that? Yeah. Yeah, so start small, run workflows you're interested in one sample first, see how much it costs, then you scale up. When you're done using your cloud environment, delete it. That was the other thing, I missed that one. So that you're not just paying for some machine that you're not using. Use groups to share and only share with folks you're comfortable with the ability to spend money. Questions before we wrap up with Liz?
Should we leave our workspace today created?
Yeah, so if you are planning on like continuing to play around in the workspace and run a workflow or use a cloud environment, you can absolutely keep it. If you're done, you can delete the workspace, and that's great for us because eventually we'd like to delete them all at some point when we close down the billing project for the workshop. So yeah.
How long does it last?
30 days. Yeah, so in 30 days, we'll check back and start either reach out to you and say, you know, can you please delete this if you added an authorization domain to it, or we'll just delete it for you. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I'll pass it back to Liz.
All right, I just wanted to point out a couple of resources here. So we've recently created a set of online courses, miniature online courses in LeanPub. And so we highly recommend checking it out if you want to go through multiple features in Terra in a little bit more depth. This is a great place to start and get hands-on doing that. We have an intro to Terra and billing, which you could, there's additional information that you might find in there, but we covered quite a bit of that today. But there's also specific information about working with data tables, pipelining with workflows, WIDL workflows, and an introduction to the cloud environment, which again, will kind of cover some of the topics that we did today, but has additional detail as well in there. I just want to reiterate, you can find support on support.terra.bio. We have getting started documentation as well as our YouTube videos. And in the featured workspaces where you found that notebooks quick start today, we have 2 other quick starts available for you to try. If you just want to get a demo of how to use workflows or a demo of how to use data tables. So those are 2 good resources as well. So like I said, we'll take general questions right now, but also we are happy to talk about specific use cases if people want to know how you get your data or find workflows for your data. Or do anything else, run RStudio, Galaxy, any questions that might be of interest specifically for your research. So feel free to ask. And other than that, we really appreciate you all coming out today.